Today, Micah was talking about the important academic works that helped redefine what trans is and bring it to a new understanding. She mentioned Gloria Anzaldúa and Borderlands, and when she said that, my mind was like, because I've read that. I had to read it freshman year for an honors option. But when we read it, it was less about the gender and being trans as like um, a mindset or an it was less about the gendered part and more about the transnationalism and that aspect of identity per se. Um, Although, as we talked about it, I could totally see how that text could be applied to other aspects of identity because Anzaldúa does talk a lot about her gendered experiences, her lesbian experiences, the the plight of man. Um, so that does make sense. What I thought was interesting, though, is how Micah did not mention at all the different solutions that Gloria Anzaldúa talks about. That was something we really focused on in my honors option when we read her work, because there is an entire section dedicated to things that we can do and should do, and one of them is organizing and activism, and also instead of outright joining hands with our oppressors, we first need to work on ourselves to understand that these people are also products of whatever system and that they are also somehow oppressed and were unable to completely form their identity outside of this system. And so when we work to break down or rearrange this system, it's quite shocking to these people who had worked to oppress us all these years, because they're like, holy crap, this isn't real or whatever. And so you need to ask them what they need as we change society. But it's also very important that they listen to us and ask what we need. Um, And that reminds me of a question that who asked last week? Was it Shoshana? And it was like, as an ally, I really want to know what I can do. And we talked about how tiring it is to always have people asking, people in the queer community or whatever, being like, what can I do? What can I do? Like, ugh, am I not being emotionally drained enough by this, oppressive systems? So I wonder if that's why she didn't really mention Anzaldúa's solutions so much as the issues she brought up. Um, and also, Micah talked about how this week she was going to talk about solutions, but I didn't feel like we really talked about solutions per se, unless the solution was we all need to become trans. And if that's the solution, I'm like, is it okay for me to call myself trans if I'm aware of the lie of the binary and not, I don't want to submit to it? I don't know. Whatever. What is this hair? Today we talked about intersex, specifically how we think of sex as very binary, but it is more like a continuum or a field. And we saw this graph about how a small yet larger than what people think percentage of the population is intersex. And it reminded me a lot about Anna Fausto Sterling, I believe is the name. And it was cool because the graph was actually credited to her. I remember her because in a class I was taking, we talked about the research she conducted where she looked at lots of people's genitals, and she found out that there are hundreds of variations of genitals, and most people do not fit directly under 100% female or 100% male. It's all kind of different. And so that helps me believe, anyway, that sex has never been biological. It is, like gender, a social construct. Um, we oftentimes neglect to mention how medicine and sciences are socially driven. People wouldn't go and discover things if there wasn't some kind of urging from society or powers at play. And a lot of social theorists have talked about this, particularly Marx and Foucault, from who I can remember at this very moment. Marx talked about how sex and sciences had to be put into play for uh, socially for production factors as capitalism became a big deal. Because, in order to continue having workers, people need to have sex and have children. So there came a push from society to, make sex like a thing. Um, and so they did it by creating it as biological production. And Foucault looks at that in History of Sexuality, how concepts of sex and gender and sexuality have been socially driven through the ages. So I think the shift now with intersex to a continuum is again socially driven, because sex is socially constructed, and in order to take away those side effects that intersex people encounter, because sex is seen as biological, so they're seen as kind of like messed up because, in some way, shape, or form, they don't fit into the direct biological categories of male or female. They have to attack at a social level to reinvent that image of sex. My hair is getting more and more geometric every day. Today, I think, was one of my favorite lectures, and I'm very glad that it was the last one because it gave a lot to think about. Um, it was the one on queering religion, which was super interesting because in America, and really when we've been learning about Dutch society, we only learn about one kind of way that religion and religious texts are interpreted. Specifically, what our lecturer talked about was liberation theology, I think. Um, and queer theology is much different from that because it's about interpreting these religious texts in ways that look to fight oppressive systems and liberate everyone versus just yourself, making the world the best place it can be versus like, well, everything is kind of shit right now, but when I go to heaven, it'll be great. And so I think that's queer theology is a really awesome concept because we've been looking at how religion has been used as a weapon against the LGBT community or utilized in a way to demonize people outside of the LGBT community, whereas queer theology, this interpretation can be used for the LGBT community um, as a coping method, as a tool on how to confront other people, to build bridges across communities, as a tool for the community to better the world. And I think that's really awesome. And it's a solution I don't think any of us really thought about because we have been told by so many people that, religion is used as a weapon against the community, to marginalize them. And so this takes what was a weapon against them and remakes it into something worthwhile and positive. And this method could be applied to so many things that are seen as a hindrance for the LGBT plus community, not only, in the Netherlands, but this is kind of a tactic that can be applied globally. And I think that brings a new light and a new hope to this everlasting struggle against these oppressive systems that are like everywhere. So I liked this. I like this lecture because it helped make something so traumatizing and so huge and problematic seem a little bit smaller, a little bit better, and a little bit more hopeful.
So yesterday was Pride. Insert a clip here. It was very overwhelming, and after hearing about the LGBT community is such a minority, and that's why we're fighting for rights and whatnot, and then seeing like thousands of people makes you wonder how many people were just like straight allies there to party. And by straight allies, I mean allies who don't like really do anything for the rest of the year. That's specifically how I felt when a lot of the boats went by and they were just corporate sponsored boats, like for Red Cross and hotels and different like bars and whatnot. And so the entire time, even though I'm a part of the LGBTQ plus community, I felt like it wasn't for me. It was for people who want to feel good about what they're doing. So they use the fact that they attended Pride once in their lives in their like bio as being an ally. I went to Amsterdam Pride. Like, okay, what else do you do? Because my space felt very invaded that entire time. There were also these weird like slogans on all of the boats, like hashtag you are you, and I was like, yeah, water is wet, like that's like be complacent where you are, which I guess is. And so I guess what I learned from Pride is it shows the dangers of having group rights and whatnot medicalized and included in the system, because it marginalizes other people once you include someone else. Um, so, if anything, Pride really taught me to be aware of what my own actions and my own fights for justice will do to other people outside of that group. Um, and so, I guess that's just what I'll be thinking about as I leave this program. How to not include people in the system, but to change that system, to destroy it, really. And I feel like the lectures, like Micah and the person for queer theology, gave us some tools and some knowledge that we can use to our advantage in this fight.